When Gwen Stefani, the frontwoman of No Doubt and pop cultural icon, began dating country music superstar Blake Shelton, there were very few people who could have foreseen the wonderful coming together of their two worlds. Gwen, who had grown up in the city and had a natural talent for elegance, and Blake, the stereotypical cowboy from Oklahoma, appeared to be a mismatch made in heaven. However, anecdotes that highlighted the unusual connection between the two individuals began to emerge as their relationship flourished. Gwen has narrated one such story, which is usually accompanied by her distinctively contagious laugh. This specific narrative tells of the way that Blake's rough-and-tumble ranch hand charisma managed to win over her family, especially her three sons, Kingston, Zuma, and Apollo, during a visit to his ranch in Oklahoma. This 1,000-word deep dive into the amusing and uplifting story explains how Blake's manly ranch moves won over Gwen's family, proving that love, laughter, and a little bit of country grit can bridge any distance. The transition from urban to rural. Gwen Stefani was intimately familiar with the glitz of Hollywood and the rush of urban life. She was born and raised in Orange County, California. She lived in a world of music studios, red carpets, and high fashion. In contrast, Blake Shelton is from the town of Ada, Oklahoma, where the culture is defined by its expansive fields, pickup trucks, and cowboy boots. Gwen and her sons experienced a cultural shock of enormous proportions the first time they visited the expansive ranch that belonged to Blake. While Gwen was being interviewed on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, she made a jest saying, "I mean, we're talking about me, the girl who used to wear platform sneakers and glitter eyeliner, stepping into a world of dirt roads and cowboy hats." Her sons, who were used to going to skate parks and playgrounds in the city, were about to have an introduction to country life. Blake found his refuge in the ranch, which covered 1,200 acres and was a wonderland of rolling hills, ponds, and rustic charm. It was like stepping into the set of a Western movie for Gwen and her family. "Whoa, is this where cowboys live?" the boys asked in unison. Gwen remembered, a glint of glee dancing in her eyes. And Blake, being Blake, just leaned into it like he was trying out for a John Wayne film. Blake makes a grand entrance. According to Gwen's retelling of events, the narrative kicks off with Blake's grandiose greeting. Blake was determined to make a great first impression on Gwen's sons, so he didn't just pick them up from the airport in a typical SUV. "Oh no" is the correct response. Tilted just so, he wore a plaid shirt, jeans, and a cowboy hat as he rolled up on a camo-painted, mud-splattered all-terrain vehicle, ATV. Gwen was trying to stifle her giggles as she continued. It looked like he had just wrangled a herd of cattle. I am pretty certain that he intended for it to have as rustic of an appearance as possible. The lads, whose ages ranged from toddlers to early teenagers at the time, were immediately enthralled by the experience. It is said that Kingston, the eldest of the group, yelled out, "Is that a monster truck?" while Blake cranked the engine of the ATV, doing so for a dramatic impact. Zuma and Apollo climbed in, their eyes wide with excitement. They took off before Gwen had the chance to object, racing across the ranch's dusty trails with Blake driving the vehicle. I'm standing there with my designer handbag in my hand, and I'm thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? Gwen confessed. A course on how to live the life of a rancher. Making a good impression on Gwen's family was not just the objective of Blake's strategy of making showy entrances. He had a full schedule of manly ranch moves geared to immerse the guys in his world. The first activity on the agenda is to teach them how to fish in the pond on the ranch, which has a good population of fish. Blake hands them these fishing poles. Gwen began, then in her characteristic style, she added, "And I'm like, do you even know what you're doing?" He gives me a wink and adds, "Darling, I was born for this." The lads, who had never held a fishing rod in their lives, were equally perplexed and excited. Blake demonstrated to them how to bait a hook, cast a line, and wait for a bite with a great deal of patience. The moment that Zuma triumphantly raised the first fish that he had ever caught, a little bass that he proudly held up like a trophy, Blake gave a whoop that rang across the ranch. While Gwen was unable to suppress her laughter at the diminutive size of the fish and taking photographs, he yelled out, "That's my boy," and high-fived Zuma. Blake pretended as though Zuma had hooked a shark, she stated. It was the most adorable thing I had ever seen. After that, Blake gave the boys an introduction to the skill of operating a tractor. At the very least, Gwen held a skeptical point of view. Blake, I say, these are children who live in the city. She recounted, they are not capable of driving a tractor. However, Blake remained unfazed. He seated each of the boys on his lap with the self-assurance of an experienced rancher and allowed them to drive a tiny tractor across a field. As the tractor was going up and down, Apollo, the youngest of the group, was especially enchanted. He was laughing wildly. "You're a natural, buddy." Blake kept repeating that phrase, and Apollo was soaking it all in, Gwen reported. The lads were clamoring to drive again by the end of the day, and Gwen was beginning to perceive the allure of Blake's harsh world. The stories told around the campfire. The final element of Blake's effort to win over hearts and minds was a nighttime campfire where the group would gather to roast marshmallows and tell stories. Under the twinkling lights of Oklahoma, Blake took out his guitar and began to strum, transforming the evening into an impromptu concert. The fact that they were already fans of their mother's music made it even more impressive for Gwen's sons to hear Blake perform hits like God's Country in such a close environment. He was the subject of their gazes as though he were a superhero, Gwen stated, and I will not lie, I was as well. However, singing was just one of the talents that Blake possessed. He instructed the lads on how to roast marshmallows, which resulted in a few absurdly blackened efforts, and recounted some tales about his childhood in Oklahoma. Blake's stories were filled with accounts of his early experiences, such as going out to fish without permission or describing the first time he had ridden a horse. These narratives presented a vivid image of a lifestyle that was unlike anything the boys had known. His honesty with them was through and through, Gwen remarked. He never talked down to them, and he never attempted to become someone that he is not. He was simply Blake, nothing more. The cowboy wins over Gwen's family. Gwen's sons were completely on Team Blake by the conclusion of the excursion. They came back to California sporting cowboy hats of their own and regaled their pals with tales of fishing, driving tractors, and singing along at campfires. Gwen, on the other hand, was taken aback by the ease with which Blake had established a rapport with her family. I thought that he was a really unique person, but watching him with my sons confirmed that. That was next level, she said. He not only won them over, he also made them feel as if they were a part of his universe. Gwen's comedic recounting of the story frequently concludes with a reference to the manly ranch moves that Blake made. Honestly, who would have thought that baiting a hook and riding an all-terrain vehicle could be such a big deal? She quipped during her appearance on the Ellen DeGeneres show. However, there is a more profound reality that underlies the humor. It was the genuine nature of Blake and his willingness to share his life with Gwen's family that established a connection that transcended cultural boundaries. Trust, affection, and memories that would remain with them forever were not merely created in the background. They were created on his ranch. A romance that is grounded in laughter. Gwen and Blake's blended family continues to divide their time between Oklahoma and California, with the ranch functioning as their second residence, as it has been in the past. The boys, who are older now, continue to discuss their initial visit, and the manly ranch moves that Blake made have become the subject of family folklore. Gwen's experience was a moment of revelation that demonstrated the power of love to flourish in the most unlikely of circumstances, be it on a red carpet or on a dusty ranch trail. According to Gwen, Blake didn't only win over my children. He made me understand that home is not a physical location. Rather, it is the people with whom you are. Perhaps a couple of fish and a tractor as well. This love story is definitely one that will last through the centuries, given her infectious laughter and Blake's cowboy charm.